fish eat frogs 4 different ways. It's a good strong hook and it stays really sharp. It's probably the only Tiemco hook that I'll use it. First of all, we put a hook in the vise and test it for temper. You want to hear that little toing, toing, toing when you flick the end of it. Always use a body cement. Stops your fly from revolving on your hook. So if you put the hook in, give it a good coat of body cement. And the best way to keep this and apply it is in an old fingernail polish bottle. I always tie flies anti-clockwise. Most people tie clockwise, but I tie anti-clockwise, maybe because I haven't got a thumb. I attach my thread quite... I don't really worry about winding the thread too close. A lot of people say they have to be touching turns, but I only tie it in about pretty quickly. And then for the tails or the legs, the recommended material is squirrel tail, black squirrel tail. You need probably 10 or 15 fibres. Try to pick them out without making them too variegated in the length. So pick them off carefully and they'll stay reasonably level. Tie these in approximately the same length as what the hook shank is, so that there is a hook shank length protruding behind at the rear of the hook. All the bodies of Mrs Simpson have some red in them. I just use red wool. I tie it in at the front of that squirrel's tail and then tie a fairly even body, half the hook shank length. And proportioning is really, really important. You don't want to have it 3/4 on the back half and only leave 1/4 for the front. It throws your fly out of proportion. Now I always tie an 8 feather Mrs Simpson. I try to take 4 feathers that are fairly small from the saddle, top half of the and 4 feathers from down the back half of the saddle, which are a bit larger for the rear of the fly. Now if we trim the flue off the stem of the feather, we weaken the feather, so it's better to leave the flue all on there and just roll it forward. So what we have to do with the feather here is line up the pattern so that the 2 feathers are sitting absolutely identical to one another and the patterns are absolutely matched like that one's there. Now if we turn this aside, you'll see the double pattern come out there. Can you see that? Yeah. So we line the feathers up and then about at the front of the true feather we just pull the flue forward a little like this.
Just don't near the hook. Yep.
So we're pulling that flue forward to give access for the silk to go through. Now if we trap the feather with the silk with fairly loose turns, don't pull it too tight, because you've got to pull this feather forward a bit underneath and the way to pull it forward is to pull with the right hand and push with your left hand. Position the feather exactly in the centre of the shank, so the centre of the shank runs through the centre of the feather. Leave half of the legs protruding behind the feather, lock it there and then really lock it in with this so that that's locked into position on the thing and doesn't shift. And that other fly that I tied earlier, a bit rough, is I let it slip round a bit. I didn't tie it quite tight enough. You can cut off the internal feather but leave the outer one until we tie in the other side. Take the other two larger or feathers, line those up exactly the same for the other side of the hook, strip off those bits of loose flue up the front, really make sure your feathers lined up and place it on the hook, pulling that flue forward where you want to bring the thread through. Place it on the other on the near side of the hook and do those loose wraps again. Slide the feather forward under the tying silk until they both line up. Both sides are exactly lined. If you've got, see that little bit of feather around here that's sticking out, it's not quite far enough forward. We've got to go forward a little bit more to make sure those two feathers are exactly lined. Then tie them in tight at breaking strain point of view. At this stage, to make the fly really durable, that feather that I haven't cut off the near side or your side of the fly, I'm going to fold back and lock over again to give it durability so it can't slide out. And the outer external feather on my side, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Take that back and overbind the butt. Then all this stuff can be cut off and got rid of. Now if the feathers are not quite lined up, like these are not quite there, just bring the thread back and bind them in place. Hold them with this materials hand exactly into place and really lock that down there. We need some red wool again to build the forward half of the fly, and by leaving the flue on and tying the flue in with the thing, you bulk your fly up so that you're making your fly body really thick. If you took that flue off, all you've got is the too thin and it won't bulk out. Just bring the wool forward enough from the forward half of the body to leave enough room for your head to be tied off. And then repeat the process with the smaller feathers. Line them up, pull that flue forward and then tie them in exactly the same as the rear feathers were tied in. Loosely for a start, slide them forward until a pattern's showing that is exactly the two halves. Can you see that there in that your two feathers now are exactly identically the front one, and there's a little curl of white showing back here on the fly, and that needs to show out. Once you've got it into place like that, wind it right forward, bring that outside one back and wind over the butt for durability. And you can trim off these two ends before we do the other side. Get them out of the way. We line the feathers up again, exactly identical. So the patterns are, pull the flue forward, tie it in very, very loose turns for a start. Work the feather forward till the two front hackles line up nicely, and then really lock them in place. Take the outer one and wind the butt off. Each wrap has to be at almost breaking strain of your tying silk. Get rid of the excess here. And at this stage, and I didn't do it with the last one, I like to put a dab of head cement in there. And then whip fish over the head cement. Five turn whips, and always 3. Now really good lurk to make sure that when you're down at the water your eye is clear. Get a feather, make a little brush and pull it through the eye, and that'll save you a lot of frustration when you're down there trying to get through an eye that's not blinded.